Good morning. It's good to see everyone this morning, and thank you for participating in the conference this weekend. This conference depends on your participation, and it's great to see everybody here this morning and in the tracks over the weekend. We are a section of educators, and we like to recognize each other when there's accomplishment in our section. And just a few days ago, one of our members was recognized as a Regents Professor for the Texas A&M system for his work. This is a prestigious award given for our colleagues' years of scholarly research in public opinion, Texas politics, Latino politics, and the scholarship of teaching and learning. He's nationally known for his work with learning communities. He's the co-author of Practicing Texas Politics. Did you pay to have that put in here? And has given many years of service to the Southwestern Political Science Association, the Political Science Education section of the APSA, that's us, including serving as a council member for APSA and as vice president of the APSA. Congratulations to our colleague and member of our section, longtime member of our section, Juan Carlos Huerta. Hey, Brian. And we knew about Carlos's award, but there may be others in the room who have won awards since the last conference. If you want an award for your teaching, stand up. Stand up. Congratulations to each of you. As is tradition for the Teaching and Learning Conference, on Sunday morning we gather and we report out on the work of our tracks. The tracks are what make our conference unique among any other professional conferences that I attend, and I look forward to this part of our conference. We have asked the tracks to identify someone to report out on the work of the track this week. And we've asked them to sort of do two things. One, give a brief summary of the track's work, and also to say something about how their track's work this weekend matters for teaching political science. So we'll just do the tracks in order. I don't know who's reporting out, so this will be a surprise for us. But the first track is 21st Century Skills, AI Literacy, Analysis, Research, and Writing. Do we have someone? Yay.
All right, friends, happy Sunday morning to you all. Can we do a quick thanks to the whole APSA team and the hotel team for putting this together? It's been smooth and flawless, so thank you all so much for that. So I'm Eric Lepp at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, and it was my privilege to serve as the moderator for the 21st Century Skills. Let me make sure I get all these. AI, Literacy, Analysis, Research, and Writing. Yeah, we covered a lot of ground. In fact, we were talking this morning, some of us who have attended this conference before and have been on this track, we've seen the track evolve over the years as things like AI have come up. And yet at the same time, there's some themes that are pretty consistent throughout time, and we continue to see those today, and we continue to push towards those important outcomes as the world changes around us. So we had a wide variety of papers. First paper? No, I'm just kidding. We covered everything from misinformation to what type of impact AI has in different types of classrooms. We even talked about things like peer reviews and peer observation, right? which we don't often think about these days, but we were saying this morning is actually one of the great ways to get around some of the AI bugaboos out there, is to have people get in front of each other like this and share feedback. So we talked about what does our track mean for teaching and learning moving forward, and we easily spent an hour on it this morning, but there's two big things that jumped out to me when I went through my notes, what was coming up the most. The first was we have a really important duty and obligation to contextualize information and help our students contextualize information. Our track covered a lot in the world of social media, AI, things like that, and one thing that came up consistently was the wide variety of expectations, understandings, and knowledge about the current state of things and how to navigate the world of, again, social media, AI, things like that. So thinking about what are the things that we can do to help students put the political world around them in context, right? And right across the river, we have, perhaps a great example of why it's important for students to appreciate that. The second thing that came up for us, which I'm sure many of you can commiserate with, was uncertainty, right? And this came up in our track because we spent a lot of time thinking about how some of the core goals, values, and objectives of the discipline of political science are, choose your adjective. Threatened might be too strong, but when we look at things like AI and the new technologies that come along, it's not that they're just a new thing for us to deal with in terms of, say, plagiarism or things like that, but it's also kind of pushing us and compelling us to rethink what is political science and what is our job. Critical thinking, writing, these are essential to what we do. How do we keep doing that well? We kicked around some good ideas for that. Please be on the lookout for the track summary coming soon. But those for us were two of the hallmarks or pillars of our weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. Career preparation in the political science curriculum.
So thank you, everyone. In career preparation, we had a wide variety of papers, and I think one of the things, if you took them, it'd be easy to oversee how they were all tied together, because we had bits and pieces of everything from what do you do to like a 16-year-old who was looking at going to college in the first place and becoming a political science major, all the way to somebody who's graduated for 10 years. Are you still networked in with them? A big thing to appreciate about career preparedness was just how many pieces in different directions there really are when you start writing it all down. But our main points, and I tried to synthesize literally, 14 hours of this into, you'll get 3 sentences. But so political science is at an inflection point in career preparation and preparedness. Was a common theme, because we have always done career preparation in some degree through courses, through classes, requirements, to some degree, often though it's often implicit. But what we're seeing nowadays that several factors are now compelling political science as a discipline, our departments and our faculties to address career preparedness head on and overtly. Federal and state political forces across the country, university attention, where they put their time, effort, and resources, as well as, at most basic, student questions and concerns. We're dealing with the student body who is, the post-pandemic student body now, who are wondering, what am I going to do with my degree once I graduate? And I think, to summarize everybody's ideas together, political science faculty departments have to engage holistically in career preparedness throughout the student collegiate experience on multiple fronts, from curriculum to networking and a host of others. Thank you.
Civic engagement and democratic values.
Hello, I'm Patrick McSweeney. I'm at Georgetown University. I have the honor of getting to kind of sit in with the civic engagement section, the best section. We had, I think, some really interesting conversations. I think one of the topics that was most prominent this weekend was topics about deliberation and dialogue. I found that really interesting that that was kind of the focus rather than some other types of engagement and participation. And I think that really is a kind of the sign of the times that we're in, where we feel like we need to really focus on going back to that basics and can we actually talk to each other about politics. I think it also talks about the institutions that we're working with as well. And so we got to hear from lots of different scholars about some of the work they're doing in their classrooms, about having difficult conversations and getting people to talk to each other and hear different viewpoints. We also talked about how this is a really difficult task that we're asking students to do. And what can we do to kind of scaffold that instruction, scaffold that information, so our students are prepared and able to do these tasks. We talked about things like social emotional learning, building empathy, but also just preparing students by making sure they've done the research and thought about their own opinions before we have these discussions. We also had a lot of pessimistic moments, talking about the challenges we face on our college campuses, whether that's kind of the state governments, our own administrations. There's a lot of difficulties that we face in this work, but we're also constantly reminded just kind of the power of our own students. We had some great undergrad students from Towson University that came and presented some of the work that they've done. And I think we're constantly being reminded that we need to be showing the people in our communities what our students are able to do. And so, yeah, keep pushing that civic engagement and getting out there and changing minds. Thank you.
Equity, diversion, inclusion, justice, and accessibility.
Good morning. Sorry, I have some notes on my phone here. We had two main themes, and I think one of our first papers really helped us think about all of the rest of the papers. It was very kind of fortuitous that they went early. And it was this kind of tension between what they called the transactional and the transformational experience in college, and how they don't necessarily have to be competing, they can be complementary, and can we do both? But it was a big discussion of whether or not COVID had kind of maybe sped up the push towards more transactional, and what are students getting out of their tuition dollars? There's this expectation that at the end, they have this very kind of tangible job skills, career skills, but that many faculty maybe have a more, college should be transformational. And so how do we get both of these things to kind of the tension between them? So I think it helped us frame our kind of summary of the panel. And another one that kind of went along this theme was when we think about advising students and getting students into the major and like involved in our campuses, how do we reach out to them so that they get both the transformational experience and maybe potentially what they think of as the transactional? So study abroad and advising and like cool events in your campus, and maybe potentially that has to be a multidimensional outreach. It's faculty outreaching, it's TAs outreaching, it's the college outreaching, and how do we do that work? And then how do we assess whether we've been successful at reaching all students? Because we know that some students are gonna find those opportunities, even if we hide them away, they'll find them, right? They're very good at that. And then our other main theme, which again, one of our very first papers helped us really, I think, organize this panel, was putting the B back in DEI, and that is feelings of belonging. And so we probably need to think a little bit more about this in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion. That kind of belonging piece is really important. And under here, we kind of organize things into curriculum, ways we can do that through the curriculum, and also ways we can do that through practice in the classroom. And so in terms of curriculum, we had some great papers on, which I was very impressed by, department-wide efforts to reform the curriculum and to even though faculty have like control of their individual classes, agreement across departments to kind of reform their classes in ways that no matter what classes students are taking, they're getting things, diversity, equity, inclusion, a sense of belonging in their classes. So these department-wide efforts, I'm not talking about my own department, but I'm very impressed with like departments that are committed as a whole department, not just individual faculty members. In terms of practice, we heard some really great papers from people talking about like reform of their syllabus, maybe games or simulations they do in class, ways they lead discussion. So very practical, I think, ideas for us in that track to think of some ways that in our own classes we could kind of address this. And last but not least, I thought this was really important, and hopefully it's something that continues with this section, is we had papers by teaching assistants and talking about the critical role that they play at many large universities. They are the point of impact for students. And so how do we then, as a section, help provide training and pedagogy to teaching assistants who want to be part of the teaching community? So I really applaud their efforts at collecting data, thinking about theory and approaches in the classroom. They went later in the program, and it really tied us together from like theoretical approaches about belonging and this transformational versus transactional to the actual very practical, like who's in our classroom, who's teaching, what kind of training do they have, and how well supported are they by the discipline. So that's ours. Thanks.
High impact practices.
Cool, thanks. So in high impact practices, we really talked about high impact practices in a broad way. We saw papers from active learning to civic engagement, talking about residential learning communities, et cetera. And with all of that, we really talked about how using high impact practices can engage and spark interest in students, and that really improves the retention, both in our department and within the field more broadly. In terms of why political science matters, the papers we had consistently had, whether it was explicitly said or not, the underlying theme of developing those soft skills for students that we know a lot of those communication and social skills have maybe suffered post-pandemic, and how it's our responsibility to help develop those through the different active learning techniques, as well as obviously using these different practices to help retain the course information. And then lastly, and maybe most importantly, within high impact practices, as well as political science more broadly, we talked about how important it is to encourage students to be democratic citizens, to engage in politics, as well as in their communities, and how different classroom activities, whether it be internships or capstone projects, can help achieve those goals, and how it's our responsibility to mentor students and lead them into kind of this more politically engaged lifestyle. Thanks.
Thank you. Internationalizing and decolonizing the curriculum in political science.
Thank you. I'm going to just summarize some of the key areas that we went through in our track. So we have three broad areas that we looked at for this track. We started off by looking at how internationalizing the curriculum has kind of evolved over the last 10 years. So we had great work on things like collaborative online international learning, looking at simulations, looking at how the Global North teaches the Global South, and indigenizing the curriculum. So we looked at those different areas. Then we moved on to the more tricky bit, which is what do we mean by decolonizing the curriculum? And we found that quite challenging, and we had lots of debates about what that might entail, and a much, much more kind of fundamental change that's required, not just in what we teach, but how we teach it and the way we go about teaching it. So We found that discussion really enriching, and we went quite big with that discussion. We didn't just look at how do we decolonize a course, we looked at programs, and we looked at institutions, and then we looked at whole disciplines, and that was a really, really wide-ranging discussion. And then the kind of third area that we looked at was, well, where do we go next? How do we build on this? How do we progress or move forward? And we thought, well, if we're going to decolonize the curriculum, that's got to be very embedded, very situated. It's very hard to generalize on what that might mean. Nevertheless, we did think that it was useful in our thinking about decolonizing to think not just about what we do in our curriculum and what we teach, and not just think about, the how we teach, but the really important question that I think came across in some of our earlier papers was the who we teach, and actually thinking about our student body and the diversity in our student body as a starting point for that discussion about how we might rethink our curriculum was a really good way into thinking about decolonizing. So we had these kind of different areas that we moved through. So we think it's a challenging area, but we felt that we really sort of got somewhere with some of these questions by reframing things around looking at who we're teaching and what the demographic makeup of our students might be.
So I'm going to sort of say the why it matters part. I'm Joseph Roberts from Roger Williams University. The why it matters is sort of comes across as a question. How do we move away from making the case that what we're doing is right to correct a wrong or do something different, but instead making it about broadening our horizons and thinking about the important questions in different ways. We want to sort of create a more inclusive learning environment that challenges, reflects, and ultimately prepares students to engage in a more complex, globalized world by exposing them to different perspectives, different experiences, different viewpoints. Ultimately, our question needs to be, can we get a better, more complete analysis, something new, if we're open to broader interpretations, broader approaches, multiple perspectives from the global south, the global north, and everything in between.
Thank you. Simulations, games, and active learning.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Rose, and I had the great privilege of moderating the Simulations and Games track. The task to report out to all of you because no one earned any participation points on Sunday morning and volunteered to do this instead. So that's fine. We had a great time. What a great time we always have at Simulations and Games. We have the most fun track, I would maybe say. We still deal with difficult issues, but we try to think through how to talk about them with our students in creative and engaging ways. So we had a wide variety of games and simulations and active learning exercises presented, from the short, low-intensity games like using Charty Party, which is an apples-to-apples style game where you have different distributions on a y-axis and you have to propose x-axis variables to explain the variation. Great for research methods, to using March Madness style brackets to spark students to have debates. So you could compare like which dictator was the worst and have them do bracket style things. Very what a great activity. And then we had some of the longer traditional sort of style simulations, from a Senate sandbox style simulation to one looking at the appointment, the appointment and confirmation process for federal judges on lower courts, to ones looking at post-Civil War legislative debates. We had ones on health policy, on environmental policy, American politics, IR, comparative, everything was represented there, as well as some more things looking at broader picture things like using gameful approaches to simulations, which is different from gamified approaches, where you kind of, instead of what we think about students starting with a 100% and going down, they start at 0 and have to earn their way up through leveling and earning experience points and completing quests. Some really, really interesting stuff. Some takeaways, broad themes. So first of all, there's a huge library of simulations and games out there, represented in the published literature, in JPSE, in some of the other journals, in APSA Educate, on the Active Learning and Political Science blog, over 350 of them, in fact, and growing, because we had more presented here. And I think that that's really important to recognize that those resources already exist. One of the conversations we had a lot about was how portable so many of these simulations are. So if you take that the brackets exercise, you can use that in any field. It doesn't matter, right? It's so you can use that in every class because you can adapt it very easily, and how that lowers the startup costs to using games and simulations, because if you can find something like that that can be employed across many topics and many classes, then the startup costs, the marginal costs of reuse become much lower. So we talked a lot about how to adapt games, how to extend games, the value of having people in the room that came from such a wide variety of subfields. So you had IR people listening to Americanist simulations and thinking, I can use that in my class for something totally different. And I think sometimes in the past, simulations and games has been split up according to subfield. We really saw the value of being all together and how we could adapt what we are doing for a wide variety of classes. We also talked about our role in making students more comfortable when playing games and simulations, but also the value of making them a little uncomfortable in the use of those games, and how to handle that. And then we also expressed that sometimes the push is to publish everything in the scholarly literature, and we realize that with simulations and games in particular, there's great value in thinking through, is my game and simulation something that I need to do a literature review for, an assessment, and push it towards JPSE? Or is this something that's just a great resource that I should minimize the barriers to sharing and just get it up on APSA Educate or some other resource so others can use it? And what a great gift that is to other faculty who maybe haven't created a game but are experiencing, as Bennett put it last night, the Sunday night problem. And so I wanted to share 3 quotes that came out of the group that I thought were really illustrative. Number 1, we can do a lot in 10 minutes. I think sometimes with simulations and games, we think you're going to have to do a lot of work and spend weeks doing it, but actually you can do a lot with our students and with each other in 10 minutes, that sometimes if you limit a presentation to 10 minutes, it's really powerful. Number 2, we are collective action problem solvers. All right, so that in creating these games, we're solving problems both for our students and for each other in terms of making those things widely available. And my favorite, I'm not a live action audiobook, right, in the classroom for our students. And I really thought that was a powerful one. And I think just sort of our takeaways and why what we did matters. A lot of us are struggling right now in a wide variety of ways, and teaching political science, I'm not going to say it's never been tougher, but it's a tough time, for sure. And simulations and games makes the learning process more fun. It makes it more fun for our students who are struggling in their own ways, and they come into the classroom and maybe they don't think politics matters, or maybe they just want to escape from it, and we can find ways to help them still focus on learning kind of through the back door. It's better for our colleagues who may not have the time to create their own simulations and games, but the work that we did here, we can pass on to our colleagues. Maybe a particular game or simulation doesn't work for you, but you know a colleague that might benefit from it, and what a gift it is to bring that resource to that colleague. And then finally, for us, it's okay to have fun in the classroom as a teacher, and sometimes indulging in a game and simulation, as long as, again, it's meeting our learning outcomes. What a way to restore our own vitality and enthusiasm for what we're doing in a really tough time. So again, such a pleasure to moderate. What a great group of people. Thanks so much.
Thank you for those track summaries. If this was your first TLC, we hope you enjoyed yourself. If you were coming back, we know you enjoyed yourself. On behalf of Terry Gilmore, the Conference Planning Committee, our colleagues at APSA, the track moderators, and all of us who participated in Teaching Political Science Matters, thank you. Don't forget about TLC at APSA. Be on the lookout for the next announcement for the next TLC when that comes along, and safe travels. Thank you.